The phone rang at exactly 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. I know the exact time because I was staring at the kitchen clock, trying to decide if that leftover chicken sitting in my fridge was safe enough for David's lunch tomorrow. Such is my life always. Worrying about spoiled food and packed lunches for a man who barely notices what he eats. David is my husband. Has been for 30 long years. Don't get me wrong, he's a good man. Solid as a rock, reliable as the morning sun. But after 3 decades together, that reliability has become, well, predictable doesn't even begin to cover it. Sometimes I catch myself holding my breath, waiting for anything to break the gentle, suffocating pattern of our days. The caller ID flashed Harrison Industries in bold black letters. That meant Arthur Harrison, David's boss. A man I'd met maybe 5 times in all these years, always at those stiff company holiday parties where everyone stands around making small talk about weather and vacation plans. He's one of those men who always looks perfectly put together, expensive suits, silver hair combed just so, and eyes that seem to see right through whatever mask you're wearing. David always talks about him with this strange mix of respect and caution. Mr. Harrison. He calls him, never just Arthur, even when we're alone in our kitchen. Hello, Eleanor Vance speaking, I answered, wiping my hands on my apron. Eleanor, good afternoon. This is Arthur Harrison. His voice sounded different somehow, warmer than I remembered, less like the boardroom and more like, I don't know, like aged whiskey or well-worn leather. I hope I'm not catching you at a difficult time. My heart did a little skip. When your husband's boss calls you directly, your mind immediately jumps to the worst possibilities. Not at all, Mr. Harrison. Is everything okay? Is David all right? Oh yes, everything's perfectly fine. David is doing excellent work as always. Actually, I was calling with something of an unusual request. For you specifically. For me? I nearly dropped that questionable chicken right onto the kitchen floor. For me? Yes. You see, I have a small place up near Whisperwine Lake. It's nothing fancy, just a quiet cabin where I go to clear my head and get away from the city noise. I was planning to head up there this weekend, Friday through Sunday, and it occurred to me that you might enjoy a change of scenery. David mentioned that you love nature, that you spend hours working in your garden. He said you've been putting in quite a bit of effort with your roses this year. I stood there in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, completely speechless. Whisperwine Lake was gorgeous. I'd seen photographs in magazines. But why was he asking me? And why just me? That's incredibly kind of you, Mr. Harrison, I managed to say. But, is David invited too? There was a pause. Not long, but long enough for me to notice. Well, David mentioned he has that big Morrison project deadline breathing down his neck. Said he'll likely be working all weekend, probably pulling late nights at the office. I wouldn't want to distract him from something so important. This was more of a spontaneous idea, a chance for some peace and quiet, maybe some fresh air and beautiful scenery. If you're interested, that is. No pressure whatsoever. My mind started racing like a hamster on a wheel. David had been buried in work for weeks now, coming home exhausted and stressed, barely speaking during dinner. Even when he was physically present, his mind was still back at the office, wrestling with spreadsheets and deadlines. He wouldn't be good company even if he could somehow get away. And me? When was the last time I'd done something just for myself? Something that didn't involve checking expiration dates or folding laundry or wondering if the grocery store would have good tomatoes this week. The idea of a whole weekend away from routine, from the endless cycle of small domestic decisions, from the quiet restlessness that had been growing in my chest like a slow-burning fire. It sounded like a dream, but it also felt complicated, strange. The boss, his cabin, just me. What would people think? What would David think? It's very generous of you, Mr. Harrison, I said carefully, choosing each word like I was picking my way across stepping stones. I do love that area of the state. Could I possibly think about it for a little while and call you back? Of course, Eleanor. Take all the time you need. My assistant has my direct number if you happen to misplace it. I'll be heading up around noon on Friday, if you decide you'd like to join me. When I hung up the phone, my heart was doing this funny little dance in my chest. I felt like a teenager who'd just been asked to prom by the most mysterious boy in school. I told David about it that evening while we ate reheated lasagna at our kitchen table, the same table where we'd eaten dinner for the past 15 years. Under the same yellow light that made everything look slightly tired. Harrison invited you to his cabin? David put down his fork and looked at me like I'd just announced I was joining the circus. Just you? He said you were busy with the Morrison project, I explained, watching his face carefully. And he mentioned that you'd told him I liked gardening and nature. David rubbed his chin, a habit he'd developed when he was thinking hard about something. Well, yeah, I guess I did mention your roses when we were talking a few weeks back. You know how proud you are of those pink ones that finally bloomed this year. But Harrison, he paused, seeming to search for the right words. He's kind of a mystery, you know, keeps to himself mostly, very private. But I've heard stories about his cabin. People say it's something really special, very remote, very peaceful. And he's a decent man, Eleanor. Formal, maybe a little old-fashioned, but honorable. You wouldn't mind if I went? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual, even though my pulse was quickening. David really looked at me then. Not the quick glance he usually gave me across the dinner table, but a real look. Maybe he saw something in my face, the weariness I usually tried to hide, or that flicker of longing for something different, something more. No, honey, I don't mind, he said slowly. It might do you good actually. Get some fresh air, see some new scenery. You've been working so hard on the house and garden. He paused. I don't know. Be careful, I guess. Not that Harrison would. Well, you know what I mean. I did know what he meant. Mr. Harrison was probably in his late 60s, always perfectly proper, definitely not the type to cause any concern. And yet there was something, a tiny thrill, a small shiver of the unknown running through me like electricity. It wasn't really about Mr. Harrison, not in that way. It was about doing something unexpected, something just for me, something that might shake up the careful, quiet routine my life had become. So the next morning, after David left for work and I'd finished my second cup of coffee, I called Mr. Harrison back and said yes. Friday morning arrived faster than I expected. I packed a small overnight bag, a couple of books I'd been meaning to read for months, comfortable jeans, my favorite wool sweater, and the hiking boots I'd bought 2 years ago but hardly ever used. David was already gone when I left, rushing off to another early meeting. He gave me a quick kiss and called out, "Have a good time. Call me if you need anything," as he headed out the door. The drive took about 3 hours, and with each mile I felt the city falling away behind me. The suburban sprawl gradually gave way to rolling hills that were just starting to show hints of autumn color. The air grew cleaner and crisper as I climbed higher into the mountains. I rolled down my windows and breathed deeply, feeling tension I didn't even know I was carrying start to melt away. Mr. Harrison's directions were precise and clear, leading me off the main highway onto a smaller county road, then onto a gravel track that I would have completely missed if I hadn't been looking for it. The final stretch was a narrow dirt lane that wound through thick pine forest, with sunlight filtering through the canopy in golden patches. I felt like I was entering another world entirely. The cabin wasn't small at all. It was a beautiful 2-story log structure with a wide, welcoming porch and large windows that looked out over the most breathtaking view I'd ever seen. A crystal clear lake nestled between wooded hills, so blue it looked like someone had spilled sapphires across the landscape. Smoke curled lazily from a stone chimney, and the whole place felt both rustic and elegant, solid and peaceful. As I parked my car, Mr. Harrison emerged from the front door. I barely recognized him. Gone was the formal business suit, replaced by a red plaid flannel shirt and well-worn jeans. He looked younger somehow, more relaxed, like he'd shed 10 years, along with his city clothes. When he smiled, it was genuine and warm, reaching all the way to his eyes. "Eleanor, welcome. I'm so glad you decided to come." His voice seemed to blend with the soft whisper of wind through the pine trees. "Did you have a pleasant drive?" "It was absolutely lovely, Mr. Harrison," I said, stepping out of the car and stretching muscles that had grown stiff during the drive. "This country is just beautiful. Please, call me Arthur," he said, gesturing toward the cabin. "We're a long way from the office here. Come on, let me get your bag and show you around." There was a comfortable ease about him that immediately put me at rest. The subtle anxiety I'd been carrying, those little whispers of "what if this is weird" or "what if I made a mistake," began to fade away, replaced by curiosity and a strange sense that this was exactly where I was supposed to be. The inside of the cabin was even more inviting than the outside. Polished wood floors were warmed by colorful hand-woven rugs. A massive stone fireplace dominated one wall of the living room, with comfortable-looking armchairs and a deep sofa arranged in front of it. Bookshelves lined another wall, crammed with books and interspersed with interesting objects, a piece of smooth driftwood, a collection of lake stones, framed botanical prints, what looked like a vintage compass. The whole place smelled of wood smoke, old books, and something faintly spicy like cinnamon and cloves. This wasn't just a house, it was a home. It felt like the real Arthur Harrison, the part of him that probably no one at Harrison Industries ever got to see. "This is wonderful, Arthur," I said, and I truly meant it. My own house, while comfortable, felt cluttered with the accumulation of 30 years of marriage, closets full of things we never used, drawers stuffed with items we couldn't quite throw away. This place was carefully chosen, every object here, for a reason. "Thank you, Eleanor. This is my sanctuary, really." He showed me upstairs to a guest room that was simple but charming. A handmade quilt covered the bed, and a window looked out directly onto the lake. The water was deep sapphire blue, perfectly reflecting the clear afternoon sky. "The bathroom is just across the hall," he said. "Make yourself comfortable. Take your time settling in." I was about to make some tea, or would you prefer coffee? "Tea sounds perfect," I said. As he moved around the kitchen, a surprisingly modern and well-equipped space hidden within the rustic shell, I found myself sinking into one of those comfortable armchairs by the fireplace. The journey, the newness of everything, had tired me more than I'd realized. But it was a good tired, the kind that comes from doing something different instead of just going through familiar motions. The silence here wasn't empty like the silence in my house had become. It was full of subtle sounds: the distant call of a loon, the rustle of leaves outside the windows, the gentle lapping of water against the shore. Nature's own quiet symphony. Arthur returned with a wooden tray holding a ceramic teapot, 2 matching mugs, a small plate of homemade cookies, and a little pitcher of milk. "Earl Grey, I hope that's all right." "Perfect," I said, meaning it. He poured the tea with unhurried, graceful movements, and we sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, just sipping our tea and looking out at the lake through the large windows. It wasn't awkward at all, it was companionable, peaceful in a way I hadn't experienced in years. "David tells me you're quite the gardener," he said eventually, his voice gentle and genuinely interested. I smiled, feeling more relaxed than I had in months. "I try my best. It's become my therapy. I think getting my hands in the dirt, watching things grow." "I understand that completely," he said, gesturing around the cabin. "This place serves the same purpose for me. I built much of it with my own hands, and I spend time tending to the woods around here. There's a satisfaction in that kind of work that spreadsheets and board meetings just can't provide." I laughed, a real, genuine laugh that surprised me. With its lightness, I can definitely imagine that. The conversation flowed easily after that, like water finding its natural course. We talked about books. He had an impressive collection, ranging from classic literature to modern mysteries, even some poetry. He asked about my favorites and actually listened when I told him about them, asking follow-up questions that showed he was truly paying attention. He told me about his late wife, briefly and with a quiet sadness, but also with gentle fondness. They had built this cabin together many years ago, he said. It had been their shared dream, their escape from the busy world. Hearing that added another layer to the peace I felt in this place. It was built on love, shaped by 2 people who understood what mattered most. He didn't pry into my life with David, but he asked about my grown children and about my own quiet hopes for the future. Now that the house was emptier, it felt strange, talking so openly with someone I barely knew, and yet it also felt completely natural. He had a way of asking questions that made you want to answer honestly, to explore your own thoughts and feelings. As the afternoon light began to soften, painting the lake in shades of gold and rose, Arthur suggested a walk before dinner. "There's a trail that goes around the cove," he said. "The light is particularly beautiful at this time of day." We walked side by side along a path, soft with pine needles. He pointed out different trees: white pine, red oak, sugar maple, and named the birds whose songs drifted through the air. He wasn't showing off his knowledge. He was sharing his love for this place, the way you might share a favorite poem or piece of music with a friend. I found myself breathing more deeply than I had in years. That subtle tension I'd been carrying for so long, the tension of an unexamined life, perhaps was loosening its grip with every step we took. "Tell me, About your dreams, he said, as we paused at a viewpoint overlooking the lake. When you were younger, before marriage and children, what did you want to do with your life? It was a question no one had asked me in decades. I hesitated, surprised by how the words seemed to stick in my throat at first. Then I found myself telling him about wanting to be a painter, a longing I'd packed away so carefully over the years that I'd almost forgotten it existed. He didn't offer empty encouragement or easy platitudes. He just nodded, his expression thoughtful, as if he understood the weight of dreams deferred and carefully buried. Dinner was simple but perfect: grilled salmon, a fresh salad made from greens he grew in a small garden behind the cabin, and crusty bread that was still warm. We ate at a small table on the porch as the air grew cool and evening settled around us. When the stars began to emerge, incredibly bright and numerous so far from city lights, I couldn't help but gasp. I haven't seen stars like this since I was a girl, I whispered, looking up in wonder. They're always here, Arthur said softly. We just forget to look up, and in that moment, sitting on a porch beside a lake with a man I barely knew, surrounded by more stars than I'd seen in 30 years, I realized he was talking about more than just the night sky. Just forget to look. And in that moment, sitting there in the cool night air, with vastness of the universe spread above us, I felt a connection to this quiet, thoughtful man. That was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It wasn't romantic. It was deeper than that, somehow a meeting of souls, perhaps in a place where pretenses fell away like autumn leaves. He saw me, Eleanor, not just David's wife or a middle-aged woman. He saw the girl who had dreamed of painting and the woman who still carried that spark within her. And the most unexpected thing was, he made me see her again. Toothed chicken back home, the unread emails, the hum of the familiar. It all seemed a million miles away. This felt like the realest thing. The night deepened, and uncomfortable quiet settled between us again. We finished eating, the plates cleared, but neither of us made a move to go inside. The air was crisp now, and it pulled my sweater a little tighter. Arthur noticed. Getting chilly? He hissed, his voice a low rumble. I could light the fire inside, or I have a couple fold warm blankets we could use out here if you prefer the stars a bit longer. The stars, definitely, I said, not wanting the spell of the night to break. Rose and went inside, returning a few moments later with two thick, soft wool blankets. He handed one to me, and it felt wonderfully comforting. He draped the other over his own shoulders. We sat like that, two figures cocooned in warmth, gazing up at the diamond-dusted sky. It's funny, I found myself saying the words, merging almost unbidden. For years, I felt like I'm on a train, moving along a set track. Not a bad track necessarily, comfortable, familiar, but I haven't really looked out the window, truly looked in a very long time. Arthur was silent for a moment, letting my words hang in the cool air. Then he said, sometimes it takes a different vantage point to remember what the view can be. His words resonated deep within me. This weekend, this cabin, this unexpected competition, it was that different vantage point. He wasn't trying to change my life or offer solutions to problems I hadn't even fully articulated to myself. He was simply present, and in his presence, I felt more myself than I had in years. He began to talk then, not about work or anything mundane, but about the constellations above us. He pointed out Orion, the Pleiades, Cassiopeia, telling me the old stories associated with them. His voice was calm, mesmerizing, and I listened, utterly captivated. It wasn't a lecture, it was a sharing, as if he were unveiling secrets of the universe he'd personally been entrusted with. I realized that what I was feeling was a profound sense of being seen and heard, not judged, not evaluated, just accepted. With David, whom I loved, our conversations had fallen into familiar grooves, patterns worn smooth by time and shared history. There was a comfort in that, but also a lack of discovery herewith. Arthur, everything felt new, he said, his gaze still on the stars. My wife Clara, she loved this, the quiet, the stars. She used to say this was where the world made sense. He paused. I haven't talked about her this much with Anjani in a long time. Thank you for sharing that with me, I said softly. It helps me understand the peace of this place even more. A comfortable silence fell, again punctuated only by the distant hoot of an owl and the crackle of a log settling in the fireplace indoors. Its warmth just barely reaching us. I felt a surprising wave of emotion well up, not sadness, but a kind of poignant gratitude for this moment, for this unexpected connection. It was as if a tightly wound spring incident had finally begun to unwind. I must have drifted off for a moment, lulled by stillness and the quiet murmur of the night, because I startled a little when Arthur spoke again, his voice gentler. Perhaps we should head in, it's getting quite late and the mountain air can be deceptive. I nodded a little sheepishly. You're right, I think Thesters and your stories have quite hypnotized me. We stood, and I folded the blanket, feeling a reluctance to end the evening inside the living room was bathed in the warm glow of the dying fire. The books on the shelves seemed to whisper secrets in the dim light. Thank you, Arthur, I said, turning to him at the foot of the stairs, for everything today has been more than I expected. He met my gaze, his eyes holding a deep kindness. The pleasure has been all mine, Eleanor. I'm glad you're here. Sleep well. Up in my room under the handmade quilt, scent of pine and wood smoke faintly perfuming the air, I lay awake for a long time. Not with a racing mind, but with a sense of quiet wonder. Nothing scandalous had happened, nothing that would make for a lurid headline, and yet something profound had shifted within me. A door had opened to a part of myself I thought had been locked away for good. The woman who looked up at the stars and dreamed, the woman who felt a connection that was purely about shared humanity, mutual respect, and the quiet joy of being truly understood. And as I finally drifted to sleep, I knew this weekend was far from over and that the most significant discove were perhaps yet to come. In the light of a new day, the next morning she woke to the sound of bird song and the soft light of dawn filtering through the window. For a moment I was disoriented. The unfamiliar room, the silence so different from the usual city hum, then it all came back. The cabin, the lake, Arthur. A smile touched my lips. I felt lighter, rested in a way that went deeper than just sleep. I dressed quietly and crept downstairs, not wanting to disturb Arthur if he was still asleep, but the aroma of coffee and something baking bacon maybe told me he was already up. I found him in the kitchen, indeed, frying bacon, and a pot of coffee was gurgling cheerfully on the counter. He was humming softly to himself, a tune I didn't recognize, but had sounded contented. Good morning, Eleanor, he said, turning with a smile's leap. Well, like a log, I replied, feeling a warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the coffee. Better than I have in ages. What can I do to help? Nothing at all, just relax. Breakfast is almost ready. How do you like your eggs? We ate breakfast on the porch against early morning mist still clinging to the surface of the lake, making it look ethereal and mysterious. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine. We talked easily about everyday things this time, the stubbornness of the deer that kept eating, his attempts at a vegetable laggard, in my own battles with aphids on my roses. It felt as domestic and comfortable as if we'd been sharing morning routines for years. After breakfast he asked, what would you like to do today, Eleanor? There are some lovely hiking trails, or we could take a canoe out on the lake, or if you prefer a quiet day, the porch and a good book are always an excellent option. The idea of gliding across that still misty lake was incredibly appealing. The canoe sounds wonderful, I said. He had an old, beautifully maintained cedar strip canoe stored in a small boat house by the water's edge. Together we carried it to the shore. Getting in was a little wobbly, and I laughed as I nearly tipped us into the chilly water. But Arthur was patient and steady, guiding me. Once we were out on the water, a profound quiet enveloped us. The only sounds were the dip of our paddles, the gentle drip of water from the blades, and the distant cry of a waterfowl. The mist was burning off as the sun climbed higher, and the lake transformed into a mirror reflecting the sky and the vibrant, tree-covered slopes. We didn't talk much as we paddled. There was no need. There was a communication happening on a different level, a shared appreciation for the beauty surrounding us, a comfortable synchronicity in the rhythm of our strokes. I found myself noticing the smallest details, the way the sunlight caught a spiderweb strung between reds, the shape of a beaver swimming in the distance, the subtle variations in the shades of green on the mountainside. My senses felt alive, awakened. After a while Arthur steered us towards a small secluded inlet where a tiny waterfall cascaded down mossy rocks into the lake. We pulled the canoe half onto a gravelly patch of shore and just sat listening to the musical splash of the water. This is my favorite spot, he said quietly. Clarence, I used to come here for picnics. I felt privileged that he shared these intimate memories, these sacred places with me. It wasn't about replacing Annie or intruding on the past. It felt more like being allowed to witness the enduring power of love and connection, and it made my own heart feel larger. He then turned to me, his expression thoughtful. You mentioned wanting to paint yesterday, Eleanor. Do you ever still think about it, or perhaps do you ever just sketch for yourself? I felt a blush creep up my neck. It's been so long, decades, I wouldn't even know where to start. All my supplies dried up or got lost in moves years ago. He nodded, slowly. Understandable, but the desire, does that ever resurface? I looked out at the waterfall, the play of light on the water, the textures of the moss and rock. Sometimes, I admitted, my voice barely a whisper, when I see something particular beautiful, Like this, there's an urge, a feeling of wanting to capture it not just in a photograph but more. He didn't press, but a little later, as we paddled slowly back towards the main part of the lake, he said, I have some old sketching pads and charcoals in the cabin, nothing fancy. Belonged to my daughter when she was a teenager. If the inclination strikes, you're more than welcome to use of them. His offer was casual, gentle, but it landed in my heart with surprising weight. It felt like a permission slip, not from him but from the universe, somehow a nudge to explore that dormant part of myself. The rest of the day passed in a similar vein of quiet companionship and gentle discovery. Wedded a short hike in the afternoon up to a lookout point that offered a panoramic view of the entire lake and the surrounding mountains. He packed a thermos of tea and some of the cookies from the day before. We sat on a sun-warmed rock, and he told me about the history of the area, about the loggers and miners who had first come here, and the efforts to preserve its natural beauty. What struck me most was his deep respect for everything, for nature, for a story, for the people in his life, even for the quiet aspirations of a woman Heberly knew. There was no agenda, no expectation. It was simply an environment of mutual regard. That evening, after another simple, delicious dinner, as we sat by the fireplace, the night was cooler now, and the fire felt cozy. I found myself thinking about David, not with guilt or with a sense of comparison, but with a new clarity. Our life had become a set of routines, yes, but there was love there, a deep, abiding history. Perhaps what had been missing wasn't a fault in him, or even in us, but in my own disengagement from my inner world. I had let my own colors fade, and in doing so, perhaps the world around me had seemed less vibrant too. Arthur was reading, a pair of glasses perched on his nose, looking utterly content. The only sounds were the crackling fire and the rustling of his turning pages. I didn't pick up a book myself. Instead, I just watched the flames dance, my mind surprisingly calm, yet active with new thoughts, new perspectives. The unexpected thing I realized wasn't just the invitation or setting, it was the space that had been created, space to breathe, space to think, space to simply be. And in that space, something was beginning to stir, a gentle unfurling of self. The you won't believe what happened wasn't a dramatis event, but an internal blossoming, quiet and profound. It was the rediscovery of Feliner, and that, I was beginning to understand, was more astonishing than any external drama could ever be. The next morning, our last morning, dawned clear and bright. The lake was like glass, perfectly mirroring the sky. There was a touch of melancholy in the air for me, the knowledge that this interlude was coming to an end. I found Arthur on the porch, nursing a mug of coffee, looking out at the serene view. Morning, I said, joining him. He had another mug ready. Good morning, Eleanor. Our last one here for now. He smiled, but there was a similar reflective quality in his eyes. We didn't say much for a while, just sipped our coffee and absorbed the peace of the morning. The quiet between us was as comfortable as our conversations had been. Finally, I said, Arthur, I don't quite know how to thank you for this weekend. It's been transformative. It felt like a big word, but it was the only one that seemed to fit. He turned to me, his gaze direct and kind. Eleanor, the pleasure was truly mine. It's been a long time since I've had such engaging company. You brought a warmth to this old cabin that it hasn't felt in a while. His words touched me deeply. I found those sketching pads you mentioned. I said a little chilly last night after you went to bed. I drew the fireplace. Just a quick sketch. It wasn't very good, but a genuine smile lit up his face. But you did it. That's what matters, isn't it? The starting. Yes, I agreed, feeling a little thrill. It felt good, surprisingly good. He nodded. The creative spark, no matter how small, needs tending. Don't let it go out again, Eleanor. His words weren't a command but an encouragement, gentle and profound. We packed up after a simple breakfast of toast and fruit. I helped him tidy the cabin, a comfortable domesticity settling between us as we moved around the familiar spaces. It felt strange to be leaving, like waking from a beautiful dream, yet knowing that that dream had left an indelible mark on my waking reality. When my small bag was back in my car and it was time to go, there was a moment of awkwardness. The kind that comes when something special and unlabeled is ending. How do you say goodbye to an experience that has quietly rearranged your inner landscape? Arthur walked me to my car. Drive safe, Eleanor, he said. The city will feel loud after this. I'm sure it will. I said, then met his gaze. Thank you again, Arthur, for your generosity, for your company, for everything. Thank you, Eleanor. Hair plied his eyes, holding a warmth that I knew I wouldn't forget, for reminding an old man what good conversation and shared quiet can feel like. He hesitated for a fraction of a second, then extended his hand. I took it, and his handshake was firm, warm, a gesture of pure respect and friendship. There was nothing more, nothing less, and it was perfect. The drive back was different. From the Drivithier, the landscape was the same, but I was seeing it through new eyes. Thekkelers seemed more vibrant, the air fresher. I felt a sense of calm, of quiet joy, that I hadn't realized I'd been missing so profoundly. When I got home, Meath House felt both familiar and slightly alien. David was on the sofa engrossed in a football game, a pile of work papers still spread on the coffee table. "Hey, you're back," he said, his eyes flicking from the screen to me and back again. "How was it? Did you have a good time with Harrison?" "It was wonderful, David," I said, and my voice sounded different to my own ears. Clearer, real peaceful. "Arthur. He prefers Arthur at the cabin. Sends his regards." "Oh, Arthur, huh?" I grinned. "Getting informal with the big boss." "Good. Glad you had fun." And then he was back to the game. In the past, that might have bothered me, that slight lack of deeper inquiry. But now it didn't. I realized that the experience at Thekeben was mine. It didn't need to be understood or validated by anyone else, not even David. It had happened within me. Over the following weeks, something had indeed shifted. I found myself noticing small beauties again. The way the afternoon sun slanted through the kitchen window, the intricate pattern of a leaf. I bought a simple sketchbook and a set of charcoal pencils. I started drawing just for myself. A bowl of fruit, me sleeping cat, the view from my bedroom window. They weren't masterpieces, far from it, but the act of doing it, of engaging that forgotten part of myself brought a quiet satisfaction, a sense of purpose that rippled out into other areas of my life. I found myself more patient with David, more engaged in our conversations because I was more engaged with myself. It suggested we take a weekend trip, just the two of us, to a little bed and breakfast by the coast. He'd mentioned Edwinding to visit years ago. He looked surprised, then pleased. I never told David the full extent of what happened at the cabin, not because it was a secret to be hidden, but because it was so personal, so internal. It was about the quiet conversations, the shared silence, the rediscovery of starlight, and the gentle encouragement from an unexpected friend to pick up a long-lost piece of myself. What happened at Mr. Harrison's cabin wasn't a scandalous affair or a dramatic revelation that would upend my life. It was something far more subtle and I think far more profound. It was Araminder. That connection can be found in the most unexpected places. That mutual respect can form a bridge between two very different people. And that personal growth doesn't always require a cataclysm. Sometimes all it takes is a quiet weekend, a kind soul, and the courage to look up at the stars and remember who you are and who you still might become. And that, I believe, is a story worth telling.